The network project. I'm going to talk you briefly about ECF, the European Cultural Foundation, which is the foundation where I work at. And ECF has been operating since, well, almost 60 years. And we are based in the Netherlands, but we were originally conceived by philosopher Denise de Rougemont, who set up this foundation in Geneva with the idea that Europe was more than just coal and steel. And so it was set up 60 years ago nearly to basically support open, democratic, cultural Europe. It was presided by Prince Bernhard from the Netherlands, who in the 60s brought the foundation to Amsterdam, thinking, okay, this place is much more open and tolerant, so let's set up this foundation here. We've been, for many years, generously supported by the Prince Bernhard Culture Fund. And our mission over the last 60 years has always been to strive for an open Europe. And when I talk about Europe, I don't mean the European Union exclusively. We work in Europe, geographically speaking, and even the countries bordering the region. So what we're now doing is we're going into this new direction in which we are basically responding to what we have observed over these many years that we're working in our grants program and in our different programs, what we are observing in the cultural field. So again, I wanted to start with this quote by Peter Vermeers that democracy is a creative act, engaging people in a conversation beyond the ballot box. Democracy needs imagination. So I'm just, instead of turning around all the time, I'll just do it like this. That's a bit easier. Well, what we've seen recently, there's a growing gap between people and democratic institutions. There's a rapidly shrinking belief in a united Europe. There's an increasing distrust of Brussels. What we are at the same time seeing is that cultural change makers are gathering together, are regrouping themselves, and are responding to this democratic deficit with much resilience. I think it is an important moment in time. We see it in the projects that we support. I'm highlighting here one of the projects that we have recently supported. It is the project by a Greek organization Before Light. This is a previous project that they did in Thessaloniki, where they basically decided to bring the community together and work on their the lack of light, basically, in their areas. So what they're now developing is a project that they will do following this a similar principle in Maastricht, in a how do you say that, underprivileged area of Maastricht, where they will actually work with the local community and light artists to make light installations and literally shed light on this underprivileged area. And this is a way that they hope to also make the policymakers of Maastricht aware that this is happening in a kind of artistic way. So what we want to do with our project, which we now call the Networked Project, because we think, as I said before, we think that cultural sector, cultural change makers are gathering in a much more fluid way, if you will. Maybe it is thanks to the technological instruments that we have nowadays that people do not need to be locally rooted anymore to be working. And this is the interesting thing. On the one hand side, you see a very local movement, as the example of the lights in Maastricht shows, and at the same time you also see, in order to do this, you can also work with people all across the world. Our field happens to be Europe, but it goes beyond that. And this is where we feel that we should connect these different initiatives that we, being a European foundation, have the advantage of having this helicopter view and observing all these similar movements all throughout Europe and say, okay, let's connect these people together, because joining these forces, will empower them and will also make a stronger case. ECF has always had a, let's say, support leg, where we are supporting through grants, through programs, through capacity development, but we also have a strong advocacy leg. We feel that one should go hand in hand with the other. So to change policy, you need to lay out all these different cases. So that's what we want to do with this network project. We want to connect a network of local cultural change makers that are rooted in their different areas in Europe, and at the same time we want to make a kind of community or a network and scale that up, because we feel that ECF has the the key sometimes to knock on different doors of policymakers and scale up these movements to see if also at the level of cultural policy, but even beyond cultural policy, it can change the way, the more or less hierarchical way policies are currently devised. Let's say old democratic models. So what we will do is we will, on the one hand side, nurture this network in a very direct way, in the sense that we will select a group of hubs, as we call them, different hubs all throughout Europe. We will connect them in a network. We will financially support these hubs to develop their local projects, as well as projects jointly as the network. Not only projects, but really a different way of thinking. We will therefore help develop their change-making potential, and at the same time, because these hubs, these organizations are already working with their communities, we feel that we will reach out to a larger constituency than the 6 or 18 or 20 hubs that we will identify over the coming years to work in this networked way. Now, the image you see here behind is also a project that we supported through our collaboration grants, which is called Mechanisms for an Entente, and it is a project that is by a French organization in collaboration with organizations from Hungary and Slovakia and Poland, if I'm not mistaken. And the point is that what they wanted to do is to focus on a train trail connecting Warsaw and Budapest. And this train trail, Bucharest, and this train trail has disappeared. And what they want to do is look at what kind of impact the disappearance of this route, which connected many, many different villages, has had on the communities alongside this route. And they do that through an artistic project, but they also include policymakers to actually highlight what the effect of this disappearing route has been. Okay, going back to the network project. What will ECF do in the coming years in order to make this work? Well, first of all, we have to identify what we call hubs. These organizations that are anchored in a certain local community, that are thinking in a change-making way, that are willing to work with specific themes that we have identified through our work practice, I'll show you later, and that really have an ambition to do advocacy at local level and want to tap into that European discourse, but do not have the means to do that. And that's where we come in, so to speak. So we will first identify them, we will connect them, bringing them together, basically. We will nourish their ideas and the ideas of many others, I will explain later. And what we eventually want to do is eliminate these new practices and hopefully make, either at regional, national, or European level, changes in the way of thinking of policymakers. So the themes that we have identified, or areas that we have identified through our work, that these potential hubs are working in. I've made them into a kind of wordle because I don't think they should be in a kind of order. They're equally important. But the themes that we have identified through our work practices revolve around ecology, around urban transformation, around media activism, spatial development, free culture, and civic action. I feel that all of these themes are actually related to the topic of reclaiming or claiming the public space. Public space in its very literal sense, as well as a mental public space, as well as a digital public space. It is all about reappropriating the public space. I think the examples that we saw, whether it is making light installations in Maastricht, or whether it is about focusing on the disappearance of a train route, all of them look at how the public space is changing and how we want to kind of claim back these agora of debate, basically. How we're going to do this is, again, as I said, we're going to nurture these hubs in the sense that we will connect them with each other, disclose our networks together with them, their networks, and also financially support them, both the local hubs as well as the network. At the same time, we also feel that ECF has had a long tradition of being open to receive grant applications and to be inspired by what is going on in Europe. I always say we are kind of, how do you say that, like an antenna receiving what is going on, and we feel that we need to maintain that quality. So we will also organize something that we now call the Idea Camp and Advocacy Camp. These both camps, the Idea Camp, what we will do is we open a call for interesting proposals around one of these themes. So for example, if you'd say reclaim the public space, that's a bit of a broad one, but anyway, see what comes in, and people can submit whether they come from the cultural field or have completely different ideas from different sectors. We will then select the best proposals. About 40 individuals will then be brought to what we call an idea and advocacy camp. So we will be having a situation of cross-fertilization, cross-pollination, of exchanging ideas, but also of maybe setting up new collaborations between these different individuals. But also very practical things like making a good budget proposal, how do you fundraise, or that kind of thing. It will be a really intensive exchange of knowledge. We really feel that it's not ECF that knows it all, but we are exchanging each other's knowledge, getting inspired in a reciprocal way. And then Advocacy Camp will also gather all of the hubs that we will select in the coming weeks, so that they will also work with these different individuals. It will be like, we've been joking internally that it will be kind of a Davos convention. And then afterwards, if these different individuals have gathered and have developed their ideas, then they can propose for a research and development grant. What we learn is that in the academic field it is very common to give R&D grants, whereas in the cultural sector, one very often immediately needs to have a project already there, even when it is a transnational project. So we feel that we should actually step in at a just slightly earlier stage of a project so that people can actually work on their relationship and work on their joint proposal, and then be awarded a small grant in order to further develop these ideas. And one of the tools that we will also use is our ECF Labs, which is a, let's say, user-generated online platform where we feel we can also embed all of our advocacy ambitions in relation to both the networked projects, so the collection of hubs, as well as all of the ideas that we hope bubble up through these idea and advocacy camps. Final image. I'm almost done. Final image is another project that we awarded, Mapping the Now Here. And this is, I mean, it's right now they're developing it, but it is a as they call it, an audiovisual cartography of the Mediterranean Sea. So what they're going to do is they're looking at how many countries around the Med have are currently undergoing great social political transformations, and they kind of want to map that in a audiovisual way. So that's what they will be doing.